Karl Marx once said that religion is the opium of the masses. And what I believe he meant was that, or let me rather make a practical example. In the townships in South Africa, there are those uncles that walk the streets on a Sunday morning, half drunk, carrying a bottle of Black Label in their hand. Those uncles they have seen the burdens of life. They have carried the burdens of life for a very long time. But once they get to that tavern, to that shebeen, the burden of life simply goes away or disappears. For that moment, it just disappears. So what I believe Karl Marx was trying to say is that for the oppressed classes of society, for those who have been marginalized by a society, for those who form part of the working class, religion, for that small moment, takes away the pains that they've had to deal with all their life, the pains and the burdens in which they will continue to carry in their life. Now, on today's video on Voice of the Margins, we will go through religion as a tool of oppression and religion as a tool of liberation. We will go into context on how religion has been used to oppress people of African descent in the African diasporas and in the African continent, and how it has been used in South Africa and in America, case studies of how it has been used to liberate people, how it has been used to help liberate people in South Africa, in Africa, in the United States, etc., etc. Once again, hello and welcome to Voice of the Margins. My name is Atisang Foster and I'm the host. When we look at Christianity and its role within Africa and the way it was taught in Africa and to the various African diasporas outside of Africa, it was taught in the lens of the oppressor, the lens of the white man. In the Bible, if you look into the Bible today, you will find various liberation stories of disobedience. And I believe there's a verse that goes, and I'm paraphrasing here, that goes, "It is much harder for the rich man to make it into heaven than it is to find a needle in a haystack." Something along those lines. But of course, because of the knowledge that the Europeans had of the mind, and the knowledge that the Europeans had of the mind, and the knowledge of the narrative being the truth, those stories were left out of the Bible, which were given to African people and enslaved Africans. Enslaved Africans were given what is now known as the Slave Bible. The Slave Bible left out all the liberation stories in the Bible. It left out all disobedience in the Bible. It promoted a message of obedience to your master. It promoted a message of, or narrative of, suffering now to reap your rewards in the next life, in heaven. Disobedience would mean burning forever, for eternity. This is a very scary thing. It's very scary to think of being tortured forever. And fear played a very grave part of convincing African peoples to turn away from their religions, to turn away from their spirituality. I would argue that African people didn't have religions, but rather had spirituality, but that's a topic for another day. Maybe in the comment section you guys can argue against me, even though my argument is so short and so concise. I don't know, but yeah, maybe you can argue against it. Yeah, but as I was saying, African people were taught to think in a certain way, and the narrative was posed in a certain way towards African people, in that, if you think about it, it would be much better for you to struggle for a few years on your life than it would be for you to burn for eternity, right? So this type of narrative, when we look into it, when we see it, it's a narrative of fear. Fear is a very potent weapon. It is a very potent weapon. So when people fear you, they will do what you want them to do. When they fear an idea, they will do what that idea wants them to do. You see, in Africa, we didn't have a component of fear, but at least from what I know, there was no component of fear in our religious practices, in our spiritual practices. You didn't have to fear your ancestors for you to honor them, for you to not worship them, for you to honor them, for you to be able to respect them, to show that they were there before, that you respect them, that you honor them. But when Europeans came in Africa, they taught us a different thing, a completely opposite. The different side, not even the different side of a coin, but a completely different coin. This was not a coin that we were used to. It was paper money. We were used to gold coins, but no, they came with paper money. That's the example that I'm going to be making. So it's very important when you are looking into these things to take fear and to take narrative. That's why I started this podcast. The media, the mainstream media, it's dangerous. It's dangerous when you have one narrative that says this is right and this is wrong. A narrative that tells us that liberation is wrong, that you must obey your master, as they did with the slaves. It is extremely dangerous. That's why I started this podcast. That's why I started talking about these things. I started reading about these things so that I can be able to spread the little knowledge that I have. Some things I might learn that in 5 years' time I don't believe in these things. But from what I know now, from what I believe in now, take this as my own subjective opinions. Even though majority of these things I've read from other people, but I formulated it to be my own subjective opinion for the time being. It might change. I might find that in the comment section, somebody is willing to change my mind. So yes. Okay, so in this section of this video, we're going to be talking about how religion became a tool of oppression and how it has been used as a tool of oppression, how it has been enforced as a tool of oppression. So firstly is the notion of the afterlife. I'll go through it in detail, but now I'll just name it. The second is the individualization of struggle, as in I'm struggling because I don't believe enough. And third, it is obedience will get you into heaven. Obedience as virtue. Let's go over the afterlife thing. So when we believe that if you struggle today, you will go on into heaven because you struggled today. When you're not a victor in this life, when you are a victim in this life, you'll be a victor in the afterlife, which is not promised. It is not promised that you will be a victor in the afterlife. It's not promised that there is an afterlife. So it ends up being that majority of people with this strong belief that there is an afterlife, that if they do struggle in this life, that there will be a victor in the afterlife, tend to not do anything or to do very little about the situation which they find themselves in. And when the narrative has been, when the narrative is something that we've been surrounded by our whole lives, this narrative, We hear it in the media, we hear it in church, we hear it from our parents. If this has been something that we've been surrounded by our whole life, the narrative of struggling now so that later, a delayed type of gratification, but it's not even that you'll be gratified. You don't know for sure. So I'd rather say that we must not ought to do things that we don't know will happen. We must not, as people, go on to do nothing about our situations because we believe that in the afterlife something will happen. For example, you find in African societies, in South Africa, a lot of people pray. They pray for their situations to change instead of actually doing something about their situations. You find that, let me make an example for you, or let me paint a picture for you. A single mother of four is only earning about 5,000 rands a month. That's around $250 a month, plus minus. That mother of four needs to feed 4 people. She's a single mother, which is a huge phenomenon in South Africa. I believe 40% of our children in South Africa are in fatherless households. So she is earning 5,000 rands a month. With that 5,000 rands a month, she needs to feed 4 children. She needs to bathe 4 children. She needs to take 4 children to school. She needs to pay for transport to work. You understand? It's a very dire situation. But you find that mother of 4, instead of looking for a better job, instead of trying to do something, sell something, I don't know, she will rather go to the church and give tithes of 1,000 rands a month. So she's only left on 4,000 rands a month. She would rather spend transport on going to church every Sunday to pray about her situation changing. Another example can be in South Africa we have a program of SASSA. I forgot what it means fully, but it's a grant program. People get grants, right? They can be a drunk father or a drunk person, a drunk youth who's always complaining about not having a job. But once that SASSA comes in, once that grant comes in, that 350, instead of spending that 350 on job applications, on printing papers for job applications, printing their CV, spending money on transport, no. They'll rather go to the shipping. They'll rather pray about it. They'll rather, think that this narrative is true, this narrative of a delayed gratification. And even though I don't believe it's a delayed gratification, you're not going to be gratified at all. So we'll rather do the easy thing than spend that 350 or whatever amount it is, 370. I don't remember if it has been increased. Whatever amount it is, they rather spend that money on useless things, on things that will not help them directly. Things that will in no way or form will help them reach their goals of getting a job that has a bigger pay to feed your children. Okay, the second thing we're going to be talking about under this specific topic is obedience. I can look back to the black church because I grew up in the black church. The main people that are part of the congregation, or the vast majority of the congregation, was made up of women, black women. But the vast majority of the leadership in the church, the pastors, the reverends, the bishops, it's always been black men. Now, I think this talks to a wider problem of patriarchy in the black church, but I'd rather digress because this video is not going to be about that. Maybe I'll make a video about that some other time. But the black leaders, the black men in the church, the black pastors, priests, the reverends are seen as a form of authority, as the embodiment of authority. You know, you might find out that the congregation, although in their corners, they might gossip about the leadership of the church. The females might gossip about the leadership of the church. In the corners, they might never actually, rebel against that leadership, against the so-called old guard, because this narrative of them being a form of authority has been ingrained in their mind for a very long time. I think that is something that we need to change, amongst the youth. Yes, they will talk in the corners, gossip in the corners about the leadership of the church, but they will do nothing about it. When it comes to that specific thing of questioning the authority, that has been pulled out. That is a no-go area. You find in the media, I've always seen in the media, a lot of stories about black pastors who are sleeping with congregants in South Africa, in various other places in Africa. Black pastors who have raped children. And sometimes it's a thing of that people know that this is happening. They know that this is something that is happening within the community, within the church. But because the pastor is seen as a form of authority, because the pastor is the how do I say this? He is the embodiment of sometimes the pastors are God in these churches. The pastors are God. Sometimes, yes. Because the pastor is the channel in which God chooses to express himself. That's what I was trying to say. People will know that this is happening, but they will not rebel out. They will not talk about it. They might talk about it, but they will not question it. They will not go to the police and tell the police, this is what has been happening, because the pastor is a holy, or not even the pastor, the bishop, the priest, whatever, is a holy person. He's not allowed to be questioned. His authority is not allowed to be questioned, etc., etc. And lastly, in this topic, what I would like to talk about is the individualization of struggle. And this is something I've seen in American media more than in South African media, I must say. You'll find that a lot of people believe that the reason they are poor, the reason they are part of the working class, it's not because of the systematic disadvantages they are, because, for example, they are a woman, because they are black, because they are born into the working class. No, it's not because of that. They're not in a disadvantage because of that. They don't believe that's why they're in a disadvantage economically, in terms of power, in terms of influence, in terms of a lot of things. They don't believe that's why they're in a disadvantage, but rather they're in that disadvantage because of their lack of faith in God. Because of their lack of faith in God. And it's been a gospel that has been spread majority by these prosperity gospel preachers. I saw Drewski made a skit of one of them, I think Pastor Todd or something like that. He made a skit about those type of preachers. They will preach about the prosperity gospel. They will spread malice. They will spread false narrative. They will spread propaganda. And this in turn, this dispersion of this type of narrative, it ends up being used as a tool. Instead of people fighting the system, instead of people putting their worries towards the governments, towards the regimes that are in their country at that current moment, they will rather seek to pray harder, to give more as a tithe. I've even seen this in the black church. When I'm thinking of giving more in the black church, there's this kind of, at least in the church that I grew up in, there's this kind of a thing of, when you're going to give your offering. If it's a blue note in South Africa is 100 rand, or an orange note, it's a 200 rand. They will wave the 200 rand in the sky, as if it's something to be proud of. But I must say, it's honestly just appalling. So as I was saying before I got distracted by that, as I was saying, they will rather face their problems on their knees, begging, instead of actually doing something about the current situation in which they are facing. And it's sad. It is sad, my people. I tell you. Yeah, I believe now I've spent quite some time talking about religion as a tool of oppression. I want to speak about the counter argument, or the counter to this argument, that religion is also a tool of liberation. And I believe in both of these arguments. Let me just put it clearly. I believe in both of these arguments. Religion has been used as a tool of oppression. It has also been used as a tool of liberation. I'm not going to say which one I believe in more, which one I believe in less, which one has caused the most harm, which one has caused the most good. I'm not going to say that. That's for you to come up with in the comment section. Religion as a tool of liberation. You can look back into apartheid times. You can look back into Jim Crow America. Those are the examples which I know. During apartheid, black people were not allowed to come together. It was illegal for black people to come together in huge groups. But one of the leeways in which black people are allowed to come together was if they were at church. Now, when I look back onto this, I think it was a grave mistake on the side of the regime of the National Party to allow black people to come together in church. Yes, they believe that because of the doctrine which was being spread previously, before apartheid, during colonialism, that if they were to be able to be in church, they would be further indoctrinated into this type of doctrine that they wanted. But no, it backfired. The church was used as a political space where political people, where politicians, where members of the community, where pastors, where reverends would be a collective in the church. They would talk about various political problems, various problems in the community. I think back to my church. I'm from the African Methodist Episcopal Church. That church was started through a rebellion. It was started from a rebellion, from the main Methodist body church. It was started by Richard Allen. The church, or the black people in the Methodist church were angry. They were furious that they were treated as secondary people in the church, as secondary congregants in the church. Let me tell you a story. What I've been told growing up is that during those Sundays when Richard Allen and the various other black people that started the church, when they would get that bread, I forgot, the bread of Jesus and the wine of Jesus, that thing. I forgot what the name is. I know it in my home language, but I forgot in English. When they would get that, they would always get that last. They were always made to sit at the back of the church. So they were treated as sort of secondary or diluted Christians. I don't know if that's the correct way to put it. But they were angry. They got angry about this. And in their anger, they decided to actually do something. It's one of the few examples when Christian people or religious people do something. And it's something which I'm proud of these people for. They did something. They went to an anvil shop, I believe, where it was an anvil shop, or it was that place, man, where they make steel things. I forgot what it is, but it was an anvil, something with anvil. They made, in a shop. It was like a factory, or old factory. They went to that old factory and they opened their church in there. for all of those black people which were angry, which could no longer take the disrespect that they were being thrown, or the disrespect which they were facing in the Methodist Church. They went and they started their own church, and Richard Allen became the first black bishop, or the first bishop of the church, rather. And yes, and as I was saying, he became the first black bishop. And then you look into apartheid times, when the church, because the church was started in America, but it came into South Africa. I believe Charlotte Maxeke brought it into South Africa, or one of her family members. They brought it into South Africa, and the church, it was a grounds for the first black lawyers. I remember reading something around about that, about the church breeding the first few black lawyers, and the first few black lawyers being in the church, and how the church bailed musicians in America who were traveling in America, who lost money in America, and they could not come back to South Africa, and the church bailed them out to come back to South Africa. I remember reading that in Tembeka Ngcukaitobi's book, Land Matters. Yes. And you look into South Africa again, you see Desmond Tutu, and how Desmond Tutu helped us in the liberation of this country. You look into Jim Crow America, and you see people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who themselves were pastors, who spread the correct type of theology, so-called black theology. The theology of we must not be victims, because we are not victims, we are victors. We must be victors in this life. And I'm paraphrasing here. So I believe that, yes, even though the church has been a grounds for oppression, it has also been a grounds for liberation. And we must not exclude that. We must not undertake that or underestimate how much the church has played its role in both ways. So with that being said, even today, you might find that today, in today's society, there are churches, like I've said, those prosperity gospel pastors in their churches, which are not good churches. They are churches for profit, they are businesses. They are not there to actually help the people of the community. Then there are churches like those where the pastors are gods, and whereby the people in the church allow the pastors to do as they please, because they are the channel in which God decides to express themselves in. The churches like that, they still do exist. Churches which are anti-black, anti-community, anti-people, anti-working class, anti-proletariat. There are still churches like that. But there are even churches today which are churches like those under apartheid, under Jim Crow America, which helped the black people come out of the struggle. So I would like to say that in today's society, when you choose to go to a church, because ultimately the choice is yours, when you choose to go to a church, do not choose to go to a prosperity gospel church. Choose to go to the church which aligns with your current standing. Choose to go to the church which aligns with your morals, with the morals of society, with being a good person in society. Choose to go to that church that will allow you to be a good person in society, that will not allow you to be a witness, to you witnessing a pastor raping people, or you know, those things of prosperity gospel. Choose to go to a church, because ultimately the choice is yours, a church which will make a better society. Therefore, I must say that in the conclusion of this video, longer than I hoped it would be, But hey, you know, sometimes this rhetoric just goes over us, over our body. When you're passionate about something, it just, you know, takes its own course. But in conclusion, I would say that we must not allow, as a society, churches to be a place of oppression. We, as society, must choose the type of. Therefore, as I was saying earlier, but now in conclusion, and I'd like my conclusion to go back into what I was saying earlier, that when you're choosing a church, you either choose the correct church or you choose the wrong church. Simply. You know, one day I might argue that there's no such thing as correct and wrong, but what is correct for you is correct for you. That's why I said that majority of the things that I'm going to be posting on this channel is going to be something that's subjective to me, because I believe everything is subjective. But I digress, because I'm going into too much now. When you're choosing a church, choose a church that is right for you and your society and your community. The church can either be a place that will bring you down, that will make you a worse person, or it can be a place that uplifts you and uplifts your spirit, not just spiritually, but it uplifts you as a person, it uplifts you financially, it uplifts you in all types of ways. So when you are choosing a church, make sure that you choose the church which is there for you, which is there for your community. And it's not just a capitalist church, a business. It's a church where you can rely on. I saw this video of some other lady asking for baby formula from churches. And those churches that said no are a prime example of the churches in which you should not attend. They are a prime example of the churches in which you should not attend. But either way, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, comment down in the comment section. I'd like to hear what you guys think. Where I'm wrong, where I'm right. More context, maybe. If you have more context of what I've been saying, put it down in the comment section. Please support the channel. Thank you. Thank you for watching again.